New Day Films, celebrating 50 years, a logo of a rising sun. The New Day logo animates a fiery yellow sun rising, casting its glow across the space and filling the letters with bright orange. In 1971, New Day Films was founded by 4 pioneering documentary filmmakers. The next 4.5 minutes take you on a photographic journey through New Day's history, founders Jim Klein and Julia Reichert conferring on set. Founder Amalie R. Rothschild focusing an Arriflex film movie camera. Founder Liane Brandon at a 6-plate 35mm film editing machine. New Day featured some of the first documentaries made by women with all-women crews. An early ad, quote, "New Day, films about women. We are filmmakers who cooperatively distribute our films that speak to the changing consciousness of women." Then, black and white shots of Amalie on set at her camera, her crew working or sitting nearby. Key art from the original 3 New Day Films titles: Growing Up Female, Anything You Want to Be, and It Happens to Us. New Day grew as a distribution cooperative of filmmakers providing social issue documentaries to educators across the country. Now, photos showing from nearly a dozen members in 1976 to over 50 posing together in 2009. The co-op filling with member owners representing a range of ages, disabilities, ethnicities, genders, nationalities, sexual orientations, and religions. New Day's first catalog from 1976, films about women and men. Catalogs from over the years experimenting with the logo, font, taglines, and design. Still images from a variety of films grace the covers. The 2007 to 2009 catalog, quote, "Real lives, real stories, real issues." And 2012 to 2015, quote, "Illuminate, challenge, inspire." New Day has grown to over 400 titles by 160 member filmmakers covering a wide range of social issues. Now, film stills show a diversity of topics from films in the collection. Choosing Children, Finding Kukan, "500 Years," Brooklyn Inshallah, Detroit 48202, The Most Dangerous Man in America, Sins Invalid, member owner John Osaki on a panel for Alternative Facts, The Lies of Executive Order 9066. Member owners Thea Rigby, Brenda Avila-Hanna, and Corey Ohama present at a conference. Member owner Reagan Brashear addresses a crowded auditorium. Member owners presenting at the New Day Films annual meeting, Deanne Borsche-Liam, Rebecca Snedeker, and strategic facilitator Elizabeth Seja-Min. Late member owner Deborah Chasnov presenting. Member owner Jonathan Skurnick at a conference at the New Day table, DVDs and postcards on display. Member owners Indira Samani and Najma Nuruddin smile for the camera. A screenshot of New Day's first fully online annual meeting in 2020, member owners holding up their DVDs and postcards on a Zoom call. The 4 New Day founders at MoMA in 2011, broad smiles on their faces. The 2018 annual meeting with over 60 members gathered. Jim Klein, Liane Brandon, and Amalie Rothschild at the center holding a laptop. On the laptop, Julia Reichert joining the meeting virtually and smiling. Here's to the next 50 years of New Day Films. Editor, Robbie Lepser. Music, Traveling Music, composed and performed by Paul Barsom. Advisors, Liane Brandon, Reagan Brashear, Amalie Rothschild, Bev Seckinger, and Pam Sporn. New Day Films, www.newday.com. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being with us today. I am New Day Films member owner Cheryl Green, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about accessibility for today's event. I am a white woman with long curly brown hair and my cute crow tattoo today. So access. For folks using screen readers, you might want to turn off the chat functions alerts since our audience will be connecting with each other via chat. To do this, go to video settings, select accessibility, and turn off chat alerts. If you're using ASL today, it would help our access team to know you're out there so we can strategize our video layout. Please send a private chat to Emily Badix only if you're participating and using ASL. That's Emily Badix, you'll find in chat. We have live captions today. The link to stream text is in the chat. We'll put it again. If you want to use the stream, just go to www.tinyurl.com/newdaycart to find the live captions if you want to watch outside of Zoom. If you want to watch the captions in Zoom, you can click the live transcript button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and read along as a full transcript or captions. And we thank you, Reagan has just pasted in that link. To help us find your questions and comments for the panelists, we'd ask you to put all of your questions and comments for them into the Q&A box, not the chat. The chat is busy, we might not see them there. So our team will find them better and try to be able to respond to as many as possible if you put them in the Q&A box. So again, questions and comments for panelists and moderators in the Q&A box. Because Zoom is not designed for maximum accessibility, we were not able to share the audio described and non-audio described versions of our videos today. We sent out a private YouTube link before this event a few days ago with audio described videos. And after today's event, the audio described and non-described versions of today's videos will be available on YouTube publicly. Both have the open captions. We have 6 short film clips from some of the founders' early films in New Day. They all have open captions, so you won't need to use the live captions during the video clips. So please navigate back to the Zoom screen to watch the videos with the open captions. Thank you to our ASL interpreters, Kat Ridley and Sarika Mehta, our live captioner, Elizabeth Archer, and thank you to all of you for being here. If you have any other accessibility needs or questions during the event, please private chat just to me, Cheryl Green, and we will do what we can to meet your needs. Thank you so much.
Hello, my name is Suzan Beraza. I am a Latina woman, middle-aged, graying hair. I'm the current chair of New Day Films, and I'd like to welcome you all to today's event celebrating 50 years of New Day Films and our 4 remarkable founders. A little background for anyone who's new to New Day. New Day Films is a unique filmmaker-run distribution cooperative providing award-winning films to educators, community groups, libraries, and businesses since 1971. Democratically run by over 150 filmmaker members, New Day is committed to reflecting greater diversity, representation, and inclusion. New Day filmmakers have won Oscars, Emmys, and hundreds of film festival awards and have been broadcast on PBS, HBO, BBC, and many other media outlets. Before we begin, I'd like to give a thank you to today's sponsors, American Documentary, America Reframed in POV, Center for Media and Social Impact, D-Word, Film Fatales, Cartemquin, New York Women in Film and Television, Video Trust, Paul K. Longmore Institute on Disability at San Francisco State University, Superfest International Disability Film Festival. Thank you to New Day's tireless organizers of this event, with a special shout out to Reagan Brashear, New Day's wonderful general manager, Karen Knox, and our fearless facilitator, Elizabeth Sejamin. A little bit about how we're going to do it today. We'll be starting with brief introductions of our 4 founders, watching 6 trailers from their early films. Then my New Day fellow moderators, members Brenda Avila-Hanna and Rodney Evans, will lead a discussion with our honored guest for about 35 minutes. After that discussion, we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes for audience questions. Please put your question in the Q&A box as we go. Okay, our first clips are from our founder, Liane Brandon. Liane is an award-winning filmmaker, photographer, and University of Massachusetts Amherst Professor Emerita, and is a co-founder of New Day Films. Her groundbreaking films, Anything You Want to Be and Betty Tells Her Story, have been featured on HBO, Cinemax, and TLC, and at MoMA, the Barbican Center in London, the Tribeca Film Festival, and many others. Currently working as a still photographer, Liane's photography credits include stills for the PBS series American Experience, Nova, and American Masters. Before becoming a filmmaker, Brandon experimented with several short careers, working as a ski instructor, waitress, high school teacher, and professional stunt woman. Welcome, Liane.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you to the organizers of this event. I'm delighted to be here. Thank you.
We're going to be seeing clips from Anything You Want to Be and Betty Tells Her Story. Thank you.
Anything You Want to Be, 1971, directed by Liane Brandon. Excerpts play from this black and white film. As narrators speak, a white teenage girl will satirically play act the narrator's themes. New Day Films logo. Anything You Want to Be, written on a board with white chalk. The girl tries on costumes and personas, watching herself in the bathroom mirror.
A woman should be elegant, sophisticated, suave.
7 Film Festival laurels.
A woman should be simple, sweet, sympathetic, subordinate.
One of the earliest and most widely used consciousness-raising films of the modern women's movement.
Sexual, sensual, erotic.
The teen stumps for class president, then in a white lab coat does a chemistry experiment in her kitchen.
Aren't you glad you're a woman? You can be anything you want to be.
Now her dress stuffed with a pregnant belly. The film is, quote, groundbreaking and, quote, a first in feminist filmmaking.
Women are basically emotional.
She lip syncs.
They have a deep need to constantly express themselves.
Quote, Brandon's early work helped pave the way for our contemporary filmmakers. Cinewomen of New York, The Teen in Cap and Gown.
When I graduated, my parents were ecstatic.
The parents glance at each other unsmiling. The teen's cap replaced by a veil. Now a wedding band appears on her hand gripping her diploma. An apron around her waist, arms held open, the diploma gone. A baby fills her arms. A saucepan dangles from her hand.
They said I could be anything I want to be, as long as I'm happy.
Quote, an ongoing challenge to the contradictions between the American dream and sexist limits still imposed on young women. Joyce A. Berkman, Professor Emerita, University of Massachusetts Amherst. The teen in her various personas flash by on screen. An ingenue, a churchgoer, a child, a mom, a player. Anything You Want to Be. NewDay.com. Betty Tells Her Story, 1972, directed by Liane Brandon, a black and white film. A woman in her late 30s, her hair pulled up stylishly, will sit in a high-backed chair and speak directly to the camera. She smiles and gestures as she talks. Betty tells her story, a poignant tale of beauty, identity, and address. A grid of images of Betty as she talks, her face caught in moments of various emotions. Quote, an iconic groundbreaker in the documentary form, New York Women in Film and Television. Quote, a masterpiece. Its emotional impact is overwhelming. School Library Journal. Quote, Brandon is to be congratulated. This is a film about human beings, how they talk and feel, hide and reveal, and hurt. Jean Siskel, Chicago Tribune. Text on screen, Betty was invited to the governor's ball and she needed to find the perfect dress.
I went off one afternoon after school to this dress shop. And the whole thing was, a real surprise for me, because when I walked in the door, it wasn't like being in Filene's basement, where all the dresses are sort of hung on rows and there's 15 of the same kind and you look for your size. But in this store, There was just plush carpet and beautiful dove gray walls. And once in a while, against an appropriate drape, there'd be a beautiful looking dress. Well, out of the kind of hushed shadows of this place, a lady emerged, and she was sort of dove gray, and she had sort of a dove gray voice, and she said, may I help you? And I said, well, yes, I'm going to the governor's ball, and I'm looking for a dress. So she asked me about colors, and she suggested that possibly green or something in the realm of purple would be just right for the occasion. So about 4 minutes later, she emerged with 3 dresses in her hands, and I went into a little discreet dressing room to try them on. And one of them was a kind of beautiful emerald green chiffon dress, and it was just, absolutely exquisite. And I tried it on, and I felt so glamorous. It was just the most incredible feeling I ever had in my life. I mean, there I was with chiffon panels hanging off the back, and I don't think I ever in my whole life felt pretty until then. I felt, suddenly transformed. It was like some fairy story out of my childhood.
But Betty never got to wear the dress. Then Betty tells her story again. The contrast between the two stories is haunting. A film by Liane Brandon, 5 film festival laurels on screen.
And I'm going to pass the torch to New Day member owner Brenda Avila.
Thank you, Suzanne, and thank you for everyone for being here. I can't wait to start talking about the clips. But before that, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Brenda Avila. I am a Mexican filmmaker with long, dark brown hair, light brown skin, and I'm wearing a rainbow colored shirt with a blurred background. I'm not wearing the background. I'm joining in from Santa Cruz, California, the original land of the Awaswas-speaking Ohlone people. I have been a member of New Day Film since 2017, and I formerly served in the Co-op Steering Committee as the very first team lead for equity and representation. It is now my incredible honor to introduce the next 2 superstars, Julia and Jim. Julia Reichert is a 4-time Academy Award nominee, an Oscar and Emmy winning documentary filmmaker based in Ohio. Throughout her life as an independent filmmaker, she has been drawn to explore class, gender, and race in American life. Her films include 9 to 5, The Story of a Movement, American Factory, A Lion in the House, The Last Truck, Closing of a GM Plant, Seeing Red, Stories of American Communists, Union Maids, Growing Up Female, and the newly released Dave Chappelle, Live in Real Life. Julia is proud to have taught and mentored many filmmakers and of being a mom and a grandma. Jim Klein has been an independent filmmaker for over 4 decades, along with producing and directing 7 films nationally broadcast on PBS and receiving 2 Oscar nominations. He has worked as a film editor on several films that have received Oscars, Emmys, and other major recognition around the world. We will be now seeing clips from Jim and Julia's films, Growing Up Female and Union Maids.
Thank you.
Growing Up Female, 1971, directed by Julia Reichert and Jim Klein. This film in black and white opens following a young white girl with her mother. Scenes from a preschool with a racially diverse group of youngsters playing. The teacher speaks from off-screen. After the preschool, a group of preteen girls playfully dancing and goofing off at a slumber party.
She was created from the substance of fairy tales and magazines, history books and television, romance comics and bridal shops. The American woman.
The girls will usually be in the dog corner, playing their mother roles. And I think I see less closeness with girls, the relationships, the friendships. This is true, I think, of females, period, that they have these little ways about them that are Nasty. I really think they're nasty. I really do.
I will follow him wherever he may go. There isn't an ocean too deep, a mountain so high it can keep me away.
I don't know, I guess I'm a little old-fashioned. I think little girls should wear dresses and look like little girls.
She's always complaining that she buys me brand new dresses and everything. I never wear them. Because now that good weather's come, we like to play outside and play tag and kickball, and you can't do that.
Now, Cinda Jones is operating the key punch now. It requires a very sedate type of individual. Female students are definitely more adept at key punching. For anything beyond the key punch, I would prefer male students. And the woman's going to work just a couple of years, and then bingo, she's going to get married and have a family. The very nature of a woman is such that it makes her wishing to get married.
Well, how are you, Teresa?
Okay. Well, I thought I'd come.
Every young woman in Terry's high school is required to take a 6-week course from her guidance counselor on the subject of marriage.
The husband should make the major decisions. The wife should assist if he asks her advice. But the major decisions are his. I think all these menial tasks should be taken care of by the woman. And when I say menial, I mean like doing the laundry, taking care of the washing, the baby's diapers, and so forth. And in this way, you are helping him to be a healthy, happy, successful man.
They say everything can be replaced. They say every distance is not near. So I remember everything.
Union Maids, 1976, directed by Julia Reichert, Jim Klein, and Miles Mogilescu. Excerpts from this black and white film start with images of men and women of different ethnicities at strikes and union protests. Then a conversation with elder women, one black and one white.
There once was a union maid, she never was afraid of goons and ginks and company finks and the deputy sheriffs who made the raid. She went to the union hall when a meeting it was called, and when the Legion boys come around, she always stood her ground. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. I'm sticking to the union. Oh, you can't scare me, I'm sticking to the union.
The nearest thing to where I lived was a laundry called Great Western Laundry. And all black women and poor whites worked in this laundry. And I decided to go there to find a job. So I went one morning and the man hired everybody, and then he called me up and he said, have you ever had a job before in a laundry? I said, no. He said, well, we only hire an experienced help, so you don't have to wait.
There was a balloon factory right close to where we lived. And we lived in the slums of the West Side. And my sister said, Katie, when you go to look for a job, I was 15, I think. Don't tell them you're 16. So I came to the balloon factory. The man says, how old are you? I said, 16. He said, you're too young. So I'm back home.
And he said, didn't I tell you yesterday we're not hiring anybody inexperienced? And I said, okay. So I turned around and walked out. The next morning, I came back again.
The next day, I went to a macaroni factory. And they said, how old are you? I said, I'm 17. You're too young.
And he looked at me, and I guess he said, well, maybe I'd better hire her for some. Anyway, that morning, he called me and he said, listen, I'm going to hire you. But if you don't do that work, I'll have no compunction about firing you. I'll fire you just like that.
In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of atoms, magnified 1,000-fold. We can bring to birth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong.
Thank you. Now I would like to introduce the next co-host. Rodney Evans is a fiction and documentary film writer, director, and producer. His debut fiction feature, Brother to Brother, won the Sundance Film Festival Special Jury Prize in Drama and garnered 4 Independent Spirit Award nominations. His latest feature documentary, Vision Portraits, celebrated its world premiere at South by Southwest Film Festival and won the Jury Award for Best Documentary at Frameline, the San Francisco International LGBTQ+ Film Festival. Rodney has been a New Day member owner since 2019. Welcome, Rodney.
Thank you, Brenda, and welcome to everyone joining us today. I'm delighted to be here celebrating the founders of New Day. And I just wanted to give a very brief introduction to myself. I'm a Black male and wearing a black button-down shirt and a gray sweater underneath. I'm coming to you from the land of the Lenape, also known as Brooklyn, New York. And it is my delight to introduce you to Amalie R. Rothschild. And Amalie R. Rothschild is an award-winning filmmaker and photographer, noted for her documentaries about social issues as revealed through the lives of people in the arts, and for the music photographs from the Fillmore East, Woodstock, Isle of Wight, and other seminal rock events and venues from 1968 to 1974. She is a co-founder of New Day Films and author of Live at the Fillmore East, a photographic memoir. Her film, It Happens to Us, made in 1971 with an all-woman crew, was the first American film to argue that women should have the right to control their own bodies and end a pregnancy. Her fine art limited edition prints are represented by the Morrison Hotel Gallery, among many others, and are shown often in exhibitions nationally and internationally. While based professionally in New York City since 1983, she lives about 7 months of the year in Italy. And now we will be seeing clips from It Happens to Us and Woo-Hoo, Mae Wilson. So
just want to say hello. Thank you everyone for being here. And it's an honor that we're having this event in the honor of all of us 4 New Day founders. And I'm in New York City today.
Roll clips.
It Happens to Us, 1972, directed by Amalie R. Rothschild. This color film opens with a white teen, Lisa Cammett of the High School Women's Coalition, on stage. She addresses a large group of people, most of whom are white. Then, a conversation among young and middle-aged women of various races.
I think it would be fair to state that the women who most often have suffered because of the unfair and inhumane legislation are first our poor sisters, and next, our young sisters. We would like to listen to their reasoning. Those in power that deny young women the safety of contraception and the right to abortion. For we are in awe of their ability to make way for so much unhappiness and chaos in our lives.
I checked with friends and got the name of an abortionist. I went to see him. He charged $500 and was very moralistic, so I wouldn't go to him. So I checked around again and got the name of another doctor, or I think he was a doctor.
It was, well, of course, it was an illegal abortion, and the person didn't do it in any kind of, I didn't realize it at the time, but the person did it in a way that was really bad. She just took what looked like a coat hanger, really, and she just sort of unfolded it, and this big black piece of metal, and just shoved it up. It was not, she didn't sanitize it or anything.
And it's very important to stress that those people who want abortions now find ways to get them, and often ways that are very harmful to themselves, and that abortion is very closely linked to the whole notion of sexuality, in this culture. And it's my feeling that one of the reasons that there's such widespread need for abortion, that there are so many unwanted pregnancies, is that it's very hard for young women to grow into a sense of their own sexuality where they can make a determination about what they want.
I didn't really give any thought to birth control. I mean, there was no way for me to get any. I didn't know anything about, when it would be that I could get pregnant.
There was no one to tell me about contraception or what to do and what not to do. I was on my own.
I want a baby. I want a baby someday. And I don't want a baby until I am fully taking care of myself and fully responsible for myself, enough that I can be responsible for a whole other person. And to have a baby at 16, I feel would just, before I was even aware of what being responsible for myself meant, would have just been a disaster for me and for any child I would have had.
Hoo Hoo, Mae Wilson, 1970, directed by Amalie R. Rothschild. This color film features a white woman in her 60s, long white hair kept in a high bun. She smokes cigarettes and wears large, colorful earrings and loose dresses. The excerpts follow her around her apartment in New York City.
One of the signs posted in my room is "Take whatever crosses your path." And one day, Amalie Rothschild telephoned and asked if she could tape record me part of my story about how old woman living in country in Maryland comes to New York at age 60 and establishes a new life. So I say, sure.
Quote, a disarming, head-on study of a disarming, candid woman. As we see her here, this earthy soul is a person definitely worth knowing. Howard Thompson, The New York Times. Mae walks in the crowded city.
I don't remember when I started doing ridiculous portraits of myself, such as pasting my head on a photograph of a jockey or a coal miner. When I came to New York and discovered the photo booth on 42nd Street, I said, wow, now I can be a superstar on 42nd Street. 25 cents in the machine, make faces at myself, therapeutic, come home and paste my photographs on other pictures which I cut from magazines or postcards.
She smokes between photo booth photos, then makes silly faces as she talks. Quote, Mae Wilson is the heroine of a true story of liberation and a beacon not only to our growing up, but to our growing old. Molly Haskell, The Village Voice.
The nature of my art over the last 15 years made me an oddball in my community and carried me beyond their understanding. And everybody seemed to be marching together except me. And there I was alone. My husband was accustomed to me as a wife and mother for a housekeeper until I was 42 years old. And then I started to paint.
An incredibly bedazzled mask over her face, Mae stares into the camera.
Some people come in here and see my work all around the room and they say, oh, what a great, happy room. You must have fun all the time in this room. The pain doesn't show.
Captions and audio description, Cheryl Green.
Welcome back, everyone. I think you are all equally excited as I am to get started with some conversation and questions. A reminder for everybody, if you have not submitted your questions, please put them not in the chat, but in the Q&A section, the little box down at the menu. Yeah, we're waiting for your questions. And now to the big event of today. Welcome again, Julia, Liane, Amalie, and Jim. It's such an honor to have you here. And I guess we can get started with, I have the honor to ask the first question. And if it's okay, I'd like to direct the first question to Julia. The first one would be Julia. Now that Liane has given us a flavor of the times through her clip, can you tell us a little of the origin story of New Day? How did you all meet and decided to start New Day?
Sure. First of all, I guess I should say that I am a white lady with no hair at all, and I'm in a hospital. And it's actually day 12 of being in this hospital. I would say New Day to me was a 60s idea that worked. We always, I'm going to start with Jim and I, because Jim and I sort of were the kind of in the little volcano of our lives and work sort of started the idea. But we always, our values always came first. I also wanted to point out for people listening that we, all of us, back then, we're old now, but we were in our 20s. We were in our early mid-20s when we founded New Day and did all this stuff. So take heart, you don't have to be 50 to feel like you can have an impact on the world. So 60s idea that worked. You know, we all then, it was a very much time of movements for social change. And we all had our critiques of racism, of imperialism. We began having a critique of sexism and in fact of patriarchy, which is beyond sexism, is actually structural. Things we're still talking about now. So of course, we wanted to tear it all down. But at the same time, I think many of us felt, how can we lead our lives in a way that kind of prefigures or tries out, you know, some of these new ideas we have. I remember Che Guevara always talked about the new man and the new woman. How can we have respect, equality for all? How can we have wealth not play a factor? How can we all have meaningful work? You know, these are the kind of big things we were grappling with and kind of fumbling with, really, in our early and mid 20s. We fumbled through like the notion of a consciousness raising group. I'm sure you all have heard of it, of like women getting together to talk about things that we had, it turned out we all had in common. Turned out most of us had been date raped. Most of us were afraid to talk in class. But until you sit in that little room and everybody equally listens, all voices are equal, you don't know that. So it was very much the women's movement. I'm diving into the women's movement part of it because in many ways, New Day, the concepts of New Day came out of the women's movement. The idea that the personal is political, right? The women's movement didn't just take on the office, the workplace. It also took on the kitchen and the bedroom, right? So, you know, how do you figure these things out? How do you make things fair? I'll give you an example, and we really tried to apply these values in our daily lives. And I'm going to get to how New Day got founded specifically. Jim and I were editing Growing Up Female. Okay, neither of us had really, we had a little experience, but not very much. We decided Jim was better at it. He was better at mechanical things. He was more confident. So why didn't we just say, okay, Jim, you edit it? We decided, no, this is not how the world is going to change. It's Julia one day in front of the Steenbeck. Actually, it was a moviola upright, Julia in front of it. Jim, Julia, Jim, Julia. Even if things went slower, even if he was better at it, it's like, let's put it into practice, in actual practice, to make things fair. Okay, so one of the real basic ideas of how to make a society that is equal for women is to look at how non-hierarchical structures, right? Do we need a president, vice president, people under that? Do we need a leadership triangle? No, not necessarily. Let's try out non-hierarchical. Let's try out, what if we all share the work? What if we all could be leaders? What if all our voices were heard? So we're in an era of a lot of alternative institutions being created, right? Daycare co-ops, food co-ops, theater co-op, things that were leaderless and run by consensus. So in the world of film, any filmmaker out there, so you finish a film. So what happens? You take it to a distributor. You sign on the dotted line and you give up the next 7 years of your film's life, at least. You have no say over the advertising. You have no say over how much it's going to cost, over who gets to see it, basically because of cost. You sign away all that. And Jim and I said to ourselves, that's not why we made the film. If we think the film should go to women's prisons and the distributor says, do they have any money? What's the answer? No. We want the film to go to high schools. I don't know, here or just there. Okay, I'm just going to keep going for a minute here. Okay, I'm going to toss it to Jimmy in just a sec here. So we realized, well, the way it's like so many things in society, from top to bottom, that model, that economic model does not work, is not going to work. That's not why we make these films. So we said, let's learn how to do distribution. It wasn't all that hard. So Jim could fill in just a tiny bit if you want about, how we kind of got started, how we learned and got started, or I could. And then we decided, go ahead, yeah.
I'll add a little now. We had to figure out how to reach people. Julia had spent 2 or 3 months traveling around the country by bus, staying with early feminist movement contacts and showing the film to groups of like 7 or 8 people at a time. And then those people getting excited and giving her names of other people, and those people giving her names, and built her own mailing list over the course of like that period of time. And we decided we would print a brochure, mail it to people, and see what happened. And I actually learned how to run an offset press. We designed the poster ourselves, kind of inspired by the poster art of the Cuban Revolution.
Cuba.
Yes. And we went ahead and did that, and we did a mailing. We came up with the name New Day. At first it was going to be New Morning Films after the Dylan song, but someone else already had that name, so we picked New Day Films, because it certainly was in our heart what this was all about, is creating a new day for this country and for the world. We were pretty arrogant at that point. And we sent out this mailing, and it was like the women's movement was a prairie fire in this country. It was just spreading like crazy, and the film just had a lot of impact. And we said to ourselves, we can't just do this by ourselves. We've got to get some other feminist films in here too, And
yeah,
so go ahead, Julia.
We also kind of, we didn't really know other filmmakers much because, we were in Ohio before the internet, way before. But we sort of began to meet people, and we realized that this could work for other people. It would work even better if we kind of broaden it out. And like in an envelope, you could stick 3 or 4 brochures about 3 or 4 different films instead of just ours. So we thought this could be really liberating for independent filmmakers who have the grit and the values to say, I'm not signing on that dotted line. I want to be involved. I want to make sure. So we basically drove and met Liane. We had already met Amalie. We saw their films. We loved them. We said, look, guys, why don't we do this together? And it seemed like from the beginning, we did not say like, we'll be president and vice president, or, we'll be the whatever, right? It was, we're just going to do this together. We'll sit down, we'll make decisions. How many brochures to print? Who to mail them to? We had to share money right away. We had to start with, who's going to pay for the stamps? Well, we had to figure all that out. It was a wonderfully exciting time, but I want to stress again, we were kids in our 20s. We were led by our values. We were not led by how much money am I going to make with you as opposed to with this distributor who's knocking on my door. We were led by our values. And I think that's been true for most of the years I've been involved in New Day. I always say, we don't look at the bottom line, we look at the horizon line.
Yeah. And I'd like to add one major thing, which is the whole point of why we made those films when we made those films was to promote social change. And what good does it do if nobody sees it? I mean, half the job of being a filmmaker is making the film, but the other half is getting it to your audience. And that was what really the core of New Day is. We have to get these films out to the people we made them for.
Going off of that, Liane, if you could just share with us a little bit of what the climate was like at the time, because Julia and Jim were saying that they wanted you both and Emily to join. So I imagine there was something about the climate of the times that made you say, yes, this is where I need to be.
You're muted, Liane. Unmute.
Good?
Yes.
Yeah, I had made a couple of films and had gotten ripped off by some distributors, and I knew our films were in demand. And so when I met Julia and Jim and then Amalie, it was like a natural. I mean, of course, this is how we do it. But I want to talk a little bit about what it was like for us growing up. I'm a little older, well, somewhat older than Amalie, Julia, and Jim. But what you saw in Julia's film, the clip, was very much what life was like for us all growing up. It was such a different world, and now it seems like the dark ages. But let me give you just some sense of it. In school, as in Julia's film, you saw girls had to take cooking, typing, home economics. There were no sports for girls. There was no shop. Our career choices, if you went to the guidance office, which is where you went to sort of try and figure out what am I going to do, if you were college bound, your career choices were limited: secretary, nurse, teacher, maybe dental assistant, maybe flight attendant. If you were poor, it was factory work, it was manual labor, and maybe waitressing. So options were very, very limited. And we were told we shouldn't plan for a career because we'd be taking a job away from a man. And somehow that seemed to, they tried to convince us that was the reason we shouldn't look for something significant. The want ads were segregated into male and female. We never saw a woman bus driver, a police officer, mail carrier, rarely a doctor, lawyer, architect, veterinarian, professor, or filmmaker. And I have to tell you, the other day, we had problems with our cable, and our cable guy was a woman. And I got so excited to see this woman climbing a pole. And I had to talk to her and just say, you know, when did you get this job? How did this happen? I mean, to this day, when I see a woman doing a job that none of us could ever have dreamed of or wanted or even been hired for, it's astonishing. At the time, there were no laws against harassment, sexual harassment, gender discrimination. There was no Title IX, and obviously abortion was illegal. So was contraception in Massachusetts if you weren't married. I don't get that, but anyway. We couldn't even get credit cards in our own name without a male co-signer. And I remember that Amalie and I got our first credit cards around 1974. And of course we went shopping, but it was just so astonishing that we could somehow, even such a small thing. It's amazing that we even became filmmakers given what the climate was like. It certainly was not amazing that we became feminists because obviously that was a thing to do. I didn't get the message, and as you heard, I was a professional athlete and a stunt woman. But I want to talk just for a minute about the climate for filmmakers. There were very few documentary filmmakers. I was one of 3 in Massachusetts. Part of the reason was equipment was so expensive and so scarce that unless you were born wealthy, had a trust fund, or went to college, went to filmmaking classes. Again, very few women in them. I think Amalie and Julia and Jim were in film school, but it was not common in those.
No.
Not
Never
at
went
all.
to film school.
I did.
Yeah,
Emily
Emily went to
did.
film school.
I went to art school and then
I
to
was
film school.
self-taught. I borrowed my first camera from, I was teaching in a middle school, and I bought, actually a high school, and I borrowed the camera from the football team off season. And I went to the local lab and had them explain to me how to load it and how to focus and stuff like that. But most documentaries at the time were certainly not about women's issues. I had never seen one about the lives of ordinary women or the issues involving women. The films at the time were about wars, famous men, primitive tribes, travel, and there were no outlets for political or social issue films at all. Every image that you saw in a magazine or on television was basically made by a white, probably middle-class man. I mean, there were no women in the field. There were only 3 television networks, plus public television. And as Julia mentioned, there was no internet, no cable, no social media, no YouTube, no email, cell phones didn't exist. So there was very few ways for the women's movement to get around the country. And that's why our films, when we made them, certainly had an audience and a need. Educational distributors even told us that the women's movement wouldn't last for 2 years. I think I'll stop there and give other people a chance to talk, but clearly times have changed. Not enough, but hopefully New Day can keep being the engine that moves social issues forward.
I'd like to add to, Liane is on the subject of what this all meant within the film world, the filmmaking world, which was small, although growing, and there were some women out there. When you're in New Day, this co-op sort of model, you have to trust each other. That whole competition, who's got into what festival, right, or who got the prize, and keeping secrets from each other, that was kind of the world in many ways. And within the co-op, you have to share personal information. Everybody knows how much you're making. Everybody knows, who's watching your film. Everybody knows what's going on in your life pretty much. We make big decisions together. Like we set the direction of the co-op as a collective group, which really does build trust. There's nobody to blame. We always assign to any new member a buddy system. So when you come into the organization, you're not sort of struggling to figure out what's going on. So in terms of beginning to change the nature of our art form, the business end, the economic end, by jumping in with both feet, right, to being in control of your money and in control of how many prints you have and so forth, it builds trust. It builds trust. And I think over many years, I'm very proud.
Let me jump in while Julia's having some problems there. I know one of the newer members sort of asked, were we influenced by different co-ops that existed, like Canyon Cinema or something like that? We actually had no sense of that whatsoever. We had a sense of sort of feminist values and a sense of making consensus decisions and the type of things that Amalie and Liane and Julia were just talking about. And then we invented as we went along. When we sent out our mailing, one film was 8 minutes long and the others were longer. So we decided, well, we had to pay different amounts. And that was the beginning of something we called the share ladder, which still exists in New Day today, where the people who were earning more put more into the co-op, regardless of benefit. It's we look at it 2 ways. We look at both who gets what benefit from the co-op, but what the different filmmakers need in the co-op. And that was a way of looking at stuff that had never been looked at before. We, all of a sudden, we had other people asking to use our lists, these successful lists of people who were interested in women's films. And we realized we had to make political decisions about who we would allow to use our list. And we used to one part of our meeting, we would get together every 6 months and meet for 5 days and stuff envelopes and decide who we were going to mail to and design things. And one thing we did was deciding which projects were worthy, that we felt had the right values we could support and be part of, and we would then share our lists and help other films to be successful as well. And as we went on, we got too big we used the consensus form, but we got too big where it was just unruly to try and have 15 or 20 people agree on everything. And so we moved to a modified consensus form where, it didn't have to be everyone, but it had to be most of us. And it had to be real. If somebody had major objection, we had to talk it to death before we moved on. And then even later with our newest facilitators, we moved to a system of sort of won't like, don't like but won't block, and just a whole different system of approving things. We also, at first, we did everything in our meetings, and then we had to figure out how to actually prepare and how to do things in advance and how to work in smaller committees to get work done and not have everybody design the catalog together, which we did early on. It was really, the thing that made New Day successful is that we were willing to grow and change and trust each other and trust the filmmaking world and trust the sense of a community that could be formed to learn what we needed to do and move forward.
And it was a cooperative, which means we were cooperating with each other. I mean, I think it's really key to understand the root of that word and what it's supposed to really mean. And we shared all tasks as we do to today. New Day is completely filmmaker, member, owner run. We have never had any grants or any outside funding, where we have financed everything that we've done through the share ladder, which is based on the income that the co-op is bringing in through people's individual efforts in promoting their films and promoting other members' films. As we grew, as Jim mentioned earlier, it was all consensus. But at the same time, no one in the group as we grew, when it was still a consensus model, ever used a veto. When it was clear what the majority wanted, people went along with it. But the model of New Day, and I know this is part of a question that I'm supposed to be asked, why have we survived for 50 years? We have survived for 50 years on several levels. The first one, though, has to do with the values of sharing and cooperating, on which we were founded. And it is because of that that we do not have a hierarchical thing. I mean, it's not a hierarchical thing. We share and we rotate leadership roles for a period of time, given that there's so many people, we need a steering committee. That was the first thing that we developed when we were so many members that not everybody could do it. Also, for the first 10 years, all the meetings were held in my loft, and they would go on for 5 days or more, because everyone had to individually express their opinion. And if you have, when it was 8 of us, as opposed to 25 of us, you need more time for 25 people to say what they have to say. And at a certain point, we got a facilitator to help run the meetings so that we could make it work, recognizing, again, this was the next stage of our development. But at the core has also been these social change values, which have been used in the vetting process as people apply with their films to join New Day. And we've been very, very fortunate over the years to have found the most extraordinary group of people that New Day has become and is. In 50 years, there have only been, I think, 2 people in the entire history of New Day who, for various reasons, we had to ask to leave the group because their cooperative sharing values didn't pan out. So this is an amazing, testament to the members. And, the 4 of us, I would say, are, thrilled beyond belief, with how the co-op has grown and who the members are, the younger people. I mean, it's time to pass the baton. We're still here. It's amazing. 50 years later, all 4 of us founders are still around. But the other also the other reason New Day has survived, I believe, is because of the nature of our membership and the younger people that have joined, is we've always managed to stay ahead of the technical curve. So first it was 16 millimeter. I mean, I don't know if any young people today have any idea. 16 millimeter was a major investment. I mean, it costs like a half-hour documentary costs $600 to get one print. And that print had to, you had to have it in a case, and you had to have at least 10 of them to do distribution. You had to take it to the post office. You had to make sure you get it back. You had to make sure that people that used it didn't break the sprockets or, that it was damaged. I mean, it was a huge investment. As the technology changed, we changed with it, ahead of the curve. VHS, DVD, we actually set up our first website in 1996. And we were also some of the first distributors to deal with starting streaming. So New Day has always managed, because of the strength of the collective knowledge of our membership, to keep growing and to keep on top of the trends in the media so that our work can be seen.
This question is, I mean, directed at anyone really, but I mean, I guess, what are you most proud of about New Day? Is there anything that stands out to any of you that would be sort of a legacy moment that you're the most proud of in terms of the organization? And anyone can feel free to take that.
Yeah, I think there are one of the things that I was asked to talk about was milestones in New Day. And I think that sort of along the way, we've been sort of proud about every single thing, that's happened since. A couple of them, these are more sort of legacy type things. Registering our first copyright, our trademark in 1982 was a big deal. I mean, we're still having to fight to protect our name, but that was a big deal for us. Another thing was the fact that Duke University is now our archive. And Duke has collected or is collecting, in the process of collecting, all of the founders' papers and films, and is collecting every New Day film digitally, which is in effect the history of social issue documentary filmmaking in America. So I think that's something that we're all very, very proud of. I just want to go back too and say, in terms of some of the early things that I'm proud of, by 1982, we had our first environmental film. We had our first film about a Black woman, Fundy, the story of Ella Baker. We had our first films about international issues. And it was very late, but our first LGBTQ film, It's Elementary, not until the 90s. But in any case, I think the other thing I'm incredibly proud of is in 2018, our equity and representation team, long overdue and doing an absolutely amazing job of doing even more outreach. I mean, we were always interested and concerned, but we really didn't have sort of a team that was able to reach out and find people and, force us to take a real look at what's the world of filmmaking and the world of films and bring them into New Day. So those are things that I'm very proud of, among many others. But
okay, go ahead.
Let me just say that our form of leadership is actually something I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of that, unlike most organizations that formed at that time, and then the same people led it for the next 30 years until they were too old to lead it. And then many of those organizations fell apart. Some of them made transitions.
Right.
We were dedicated to the idea, it goes back to the early things that everyone was talking about like sharing knowledge and sharing capability and learning skills. But we had a strong motivation in building and teaching and learning leadership. And we've gone through generations of people who've taken the leadership, probably 4, 5, 6 generations at this point of different people who made New Day the center of their lives and led it and helped it to continue to be successful. We stopped doing that a long time ago. At this point, we've stayed involved through our films and through a few things at New Day, but I'm so proud of the people now who are New Day, the men and women. And I'm proud of how diverse we are now compared to our beginnings as just Caucasian men and women. You know, in the early years, we sort of cooperated with the Black Filmmakers Co-op and other organizations. And I have to say, in our first decade, the politics of the time was more that it was important for people of color to form their own organizations. And we were always involved in being supportive of that and sharing things and very close to those people, but we did not work for diversity within our own organization. And over the past 20 or 30 years, with a lot of effort in the very recent years, that's really changed dramatically, and I'm so proud of that.
I'd like to, just one thing before I forget.
I'll get in after you, Liane, okay.
And me too.
If it wasn't for our wonderful helpers, our office manager, Karen, and Elizabeth, I think, I don't know, they make the trains run on time, basically, and keep us all in touch and help structure our meetings. And without our wonderful support staff, it's hard to imagine New Day. So just a shout out there.
I just wanted to throw in that I always look at, really from the beginning, like what impact does the fact of New Day have on the film community? Like from the beginning, we represented like, oh, there's another path. You know, you don't have to sign on that dotted line and move on. And, you know, some filmmakers, you know, I meet with a lot of younger filmmakers who are facing like, you know, I've got this idea and I think it's a really strong idea and I have great access, but, you know, I can't get anybody interested in Netflix or HBO or
We've lost Julia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll just say as someone who started.
I guess I can't.
You're breaking up a little bit, Julia, so we're having trouble hearing you. Sometimes if you turn the video off, it helps with the audio. But I was just gonna maybe take that as a lead into.
Go ahead.
I was just going to take that as a lead into, you know, some of the equity and representation work that both Brenda and I are deeply involved in, and you know, bringing in a new day for New Day, right, and sort of changing demographics and what does it mean to do outreach in predominantly BIPOC spaces and spaces for filmmakers with disabilities such as myself, and the work of, you know, making those filmmakers feel like New Day can be a home for them, and that there is space for them. And I'm just wondering, you know, given those that those filmmakers were not at the core of the founding, like how do you think of those shifts in terms of opening up the space to BIPOC filmmakers, to filmmakers with disabilities, to international filmmakers? We just had our first international filmmaker join New Day, and all of those things I think are really exciting, and bringing in a whole new different type of filmmaker that might not have thought New Day was the place for them because they didn't see anyone that looked like them at New Day, frankly. And I think that's slowly shifting, but I do think that we have a lot of work to do. And I do think that Brenda and I, as part of the E&R team, have put a lot of work into changing what people think of as New Day, because of it, you know, might not be the first thing that a BIPOC filmmaker thinks of when they think about where to take their film, right? So if we're coming in and saying like we're a part of New Day, it changes who they think is represented by the organization or who they think is within the organization. So I'm just wondering if anyone wants to speak to that, or
I think it's fantastic. It's been part of our desires and our wishes all along, and it's, you know, long overdue that we finally have some active members who are taking this in hand and doing the work to expand the membership of New Day in these directions, because all along we've wanted to represent all groups that had major issues that needed representing. I mean, that's what the films were all about. And there's something else that may be a little controversial if I dare bring it up, but I think another reason that New Day has been successful from the beginning is because we have been a majority female organization with the collaborative basis of working in the world that women have, without the competition thing that is so common in male-dominated organizations. And while we have embraced everybody, I think it's obvious that the men who are part of New Day share that collaborative spirit and are willing to work with women on an equal level and without these hierarchical issues to deal with. And if they don't, then they don't belong in New Day and it doesn't fit. So I think that's, you know, something major, and it's a new, I don't know how new it is, but I think we've established the fact it works as a model. And that's why we're 50 years old and are still growing and have all the amazing films that are in New Day. And that's.
Yeah, I don't know if it's time to turn it over to maybe some audience questions. Do we have questions from the audience?
I think we do. People are voting up on some questions.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to read the first one, the one that got a lot of votes. This was asked by Seth Hernandez.
Okay.
Ronquillo, hi. So the question Seth is asking is, they're saying, I'm part of a BIPOC organization that aspires for a non-hierarchical co-op structure, but we find ourselves facing practical challenges, sometimes around governance, figuring our operational structure, etc. What advice do you all have for filmmakers in this era of Netflix, streaming, etc., who want to create a co-op model and also sustain ourselves and our families? Do you have examples from the early days of New Day on how you navigated practical challenges to operationalize your values? Parentheses, sorry for the long question. And I know you all talked about how everything started and happened, but I guess if you can put some of that into today's context with all of this like streaming platforms and everything that's changing so fast, if these new organizations that are trying to go adapt the co-op model to today, what kind of advice would you give them to set strong groundwork for that? Stay afloat.
Good. Unmute, Julia.
Steve's trying to do it.
There you go, Julia, you're on.
That work. You know, that's a great question. And it's going to be to your generation to figure it out. But I would say it's really important to get to know each other well. So there's trust, to define what your goals are, right? And whether they be blue sky or whether they be like, okay, I need to earn, you know, $5,000 a month. So how do I do that? Or whatever it is, right? You keep your feet on the ground and your eyes on the horizon, right? And I would say also, like, talk to some of the other folks, like New Day, not in this context, it's too big to really get into any detail, but other organizations or people who are trustworthy, like within HBO and so forth, to see what their experiences are. I mean, I don't know the age of you guys. I see what you're saying around governance, figuring out your structure and all that. I just think keep your values, talk it through, write it down, vote like you've agreed. And once things are voted and agreed upon, you go forward. And you can chart, New Day, we've constantly had to rechart our course, right? Even when it's written down. Like then you realize 6 months later, the next meeting, well, that did work and that didn't work. But there's also a certain amount of like, take the plunge. If you're out there doing it on your own, that's a lot harder than doing it with people you know and you trust and are in it together and will share the work.
This is Jim. Let me add a little bit to that. I think it's very important to trust yourself and trust your community. One of the things we had going for us is we didn't have like a deep respect for the powers that be of the time and that the way things were done. And we needed to invent new ways, and we could not have done that just ourselves. It was because we were supported by a community of others, this whole society that really wanted to make social change. That is very true today as well. And you really need to work with other people that way. Of course, you have to deal with the Netflix and the HBOs and the Amazons, but don't make that all you deal with. Deal on a community level with what people need. And the other thing I would say is, in terms of governance, we always had help. We always had incredibly talented people who shared our values, who knew more about governance, who helped us do it, and have the humility to understand that they will know more than you and they can do that as well. I want to say that New Day was not a smooth ride. We had several times where we almost stopped doing it because we could not figure out how to make it work anymore. Like the medium changed, the costs changed, the methods of communications changed. But it really, we got help from other people in terms of doing it too. And that's what I would say to you about today, is it's not all on your shoulders alone. But as long as you stick to your values and involve the people that you want to make films for, as well as the filmmaking community, you'll find a way.
Yeah, I agree with what and we didn't bring in experts, which we did till later. I think at first it was just kind of, let's define what we can do together. It doesn't have to be the whole world. So we decided, okay, we're going to do these mailings together. We're going to have a mailing house. A house that mails out the prints back in the day, right? Very specific, and it grew from there. But you don't have to take on the whole world. Like figure out what you wanted, what makes sense for you all to do together. Really agree on it, and share the work, and be willing to say, hey, you're not, you didn't accomplish your task, or you weren't available when you were needed. But also to say, hey, right on, look how far we've come. It's you fumble forward. There's a way in which you look back at the history and you look, oh, wow, that was something. But you really do fumble forward. But the basics are, as Jim said, like trust, I say practicality, one step at a time. And you leave room for growth. You don't have to bite it all off at once. I hope that's helpful. And I really wish you luck. I don't know who you are. Exactly.
His name is Seth. Seth is actually involved with an organization of undocumented filmmakers and is one of the leaders of that organization, and is doing amazing work. Both Brenda and I are friends with Seth.
Yeah, and I just so really quick, Rodney, and everyone, this is Brenda. I just wanted to point out, just really quickly going off of what Julia was saying, that about trusting each other, that New Day has never received grants or other institutional support. And a lot of its success comes from the generosity of its members and the way we share and organize ourselves to lift up one another. So that's all. Thank you, Rodney. Please go ahead with the next question.
Yeah, no, that's important. Thank you for adding that. The second question is a question for Julia. Can you speak about your experience / decision-making process, RE distribution for American Factory via Netflix? What challenges for documentary filmmakers today that you may or may not have envisioned in the early days of New Day films? And that is a question from Megan.
Yeah, I don't think that would be a long discussion. I could not do it
It's its
justice at all.
own Zoom webinar.
Factory, yeah, its own thing, which I have talked about for sure. But it's interesting, because I know a lot of younger filmmakers who are good, very good, and want to see their lives as being filmmakers. It's interesting. We always said we were independent. We, meaning not just me and Jim, but we were independent filmmakers, right? We didn't work for PBS. We didn't work for, well, there wasn't HBO, but whatever was out there then. We were independents. We made up our minds what we wanted to make films about. We found the way to do it. We borrowed our friends' cameras. We asked our friends to crew with us. We edited in our house. Independent filmmakers. But there really was not. Nowadays, people are really I'm sorry, we're losing me again here. I don't know if you can still hear me, but I'll keep going just in case.
Yeah, I can hear you.
The sort of bait of, the big money from HBO, the big money from Netflix. How can I get that? My life would be set if I could just find an idea they want. That's a challenge to feeling like I'm an independent filmmaker. I have my own ideas. I have access to a great story. That's new, and it's both good and bad. It's both good and bad. Sometimes you get support for what you've already started. Oh, that's another thing I would say is that we have always started our films with no funding. I see Amalie shaking her head. That's to me a really important idea. You get yourself, you need a camera or somebody who has a camera, and they're not that expensive. The beautiful work you can do with little simple like $1,500 cameras.
No, today you can do on your cell phone what it costs hundreds of thousands of dollars of cinema equipment back then.
Don't hesitate. Don't be like, oh, I have to get my first $10,000 grant or I'm not going to start. Bullshit. If you start, take the step, stick your foot in the water. I think if there's all this sort of waiting around and talking about big money, I think it's good and bad. It's good and bad. And I'm not in that world now, so it's good and bad. And I think the young ones should watch carefully and should, again, I always say, just start, just get started.
And please share with each other as filmmakers, as well as getting your work out. Please do camera work for your friend who needs the stuff done. Do every step that needs to be done. The equipment is so inexpensive now, it's really the labor costs that make film expensive. And that's great when you can get the resources to do that. But when you can't, make the media anyway. Make what needs to be made. I think that's true of many people we're talking to, but it's always a good thing to say.
It's always like form community, right? Form community like whoever could help you produce, whoever could help you do sound, whoever could help you wrangle, whatever. Be generous and people will be generous to you. And that's about forming a trusting community, whether you're doing distribution or not. I always advise everybody, and that's what we do. We live in a town of 3,000 people,
Yeah. I was just going to say that, your process is my process with my most recent film, Vision Portraits. And I think as someone who is a shapeshifter that moves between fiction and documentary, for me, documentary is so liberating because I can just call up a friend and say, hey, can you meet me at John the photographer's house on Wednesday with the GH5, and I'll borrow the Zoom H4n recorder, and we'll get the lavalier mic, and we'll just do the interviews and have him showing us some photographs and telling stories for that first shoot, and just green light yourself and get it started. And so, you know, I do think that tradition is still very much thriving.
It's the way to go. It's the way to go.
Yeah.
Keep your engines oiled.
Yeah,
and your
absolutely.
community close. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. Let me see if there are other questions.
I think we have time. This is Brenda. I think we have time for one more question.
Okay. Do you want to choose?
Sure. Thank you, Rodney. Thank you, everyone. So I guess the last question from the audience, we're combining a few questions. So did libraries help play a role in your early success? But also, do libraries still help today? And right before we close, if you want to like kind of connect that to how that fits into the vision of New Day for the next decade.
Yeah, I think that that's an important question, because we've never really actually addressed it since we began and we still are an educational distributor. That is, our market is to educational institutions, and the public libraries, particularly the New York Public Library, were our first supporters. Also, public libraries were the first places where ordinary people could see 16mm films because of the screening programs that they had. They were the first ones that certainly had budgets to buy 16mm prints.
Right.
I mean, we were taking films to women's organizations, people that didn't have any money, as Julia brought up at the beginning. It didn't matter. It was important for the people to see the film. But if you at least charge $5 for shipping and handling fee, they treated the print with respect. Whereas if you gave it away for nothing, it didn't mean any. I mean, we learned a lot of hard lessons along the way, because we do live in a capitalist society. And if people have to pay $5, at least they respect what they're getting. If they're getting it for free, well, but the libraries and the educational institutions, university libraries, museums, cultural institutions, all of that is the foundation of New Day distribution.
Yeah,
I
was going to say that libraries actually sustained us in the early days, university libraries and public libraries. And now through Canopy, we're reaching a lot of public libraries where people can go, if they have a library card, they can stream our films. So libraries are still right now a very active part of our distribution and our outreach. I think we're very grateful to the public libraries.
In terms of how we've affected the film community, I was sort of cut off there before. The whole notion that Amalie raised, that half the job is getting the film to the audience, right? And that notion was not present. I mean, it was for like Kartemkun, I know is participating here, few pockets here and there around the country. But the idea that a filmmaker doesn't just make a film and it streams on Netflix and that's the end of it. I mean, some people do feel that way, but I think the idea that you target an audience, this film has use in discussion, in activism, whether it's through a library, a university, a community group, a political organization. We could give you days and nights of stories of how our films, whether they be 15-minute films, hour-long films, have made an actual difference because we brought people together to see it, to discuss it, and to learn from it. And that's something that I think the New Day model brought, in a broad sense, to the world of filmmakers, let's say. That's a path we opened. That's a door we opened in people's minds. Oh yeah, you know, that's a whole life that my film can have that will make a difference in the world. It's not just, again, the big streamer and the big check.
They're incredible things to close on. Unfortunately, we're at time. I hate to say that. I hate to be ending the party. Make me feel really horrible. We should have made this a 2-hour discussion. But we do thank you all for coming. We want to thank our sponsors again. And we want to thank our four special guests. We are so delighted to be honoring you and this amazing 50-year history. I'm sure you didn't know that you were building something so friggin' great when you started. So thank you from the bottom of our hearts. If you want to learn more about New Day events, if you're a filmmaker out there and you're interested in joining New Day, you can find all of it at newday.com. And I just popped in the chat, we'll have a 10% discount for any attendees today. So you can experience our films, check it out, our collection at newday.com. And the code is NewDay50 to celebrate 50. So
Right.
Thank you all so much. We're just so absolutely pleased. Mwah.
Bye, Liane. Bye, Emily.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye
It's a
all.
delight.
Wonderful to see you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Julia.
Thank you for doing
Thank
this.
you.
Thank you so
Julia.
much for doing this.
Our pleasure. Thank you.